The woolly mammoth. Where was I? Whether or not you've heard about the plans to de-extinct the woolly mammoth, whether you think that's a good idea or not, could help offset some of the impacts of climate change in colder ecosystems. It is a matter of consideration. There are big investments into this project, and you can probably appreciate some of the really thorny ethical questions this raises. What I actually wanted to highlight was this editorial in Nature a few years ago, which was arguing that, first of all, these are questions that can't be left to scientists alone to navigate, and even suitably skilled social scientists alone can't navigate those questions. They need to bring in members of the public. And I'm really sorry, this is going the wrong way. Sorry, guys. Am I? Is it just not? It's a bit of comedy. I just don't know why it's not responding. Maybe I'm not pointing to the right thing. Yeah, back to the, I'll just keep talking. So the point of the Nature editorial was saying that scientists alone can't be answering these questions. We need to bring in members of the public, and there are really good, rigorous processes to do this that include opportunities for public deliberation. And so what we want to talk about today is one example of those processes. And if this can be done to answer the mammoth question, it can certainly be done, and it's necessary to do in the reef space where, as you know, there are a number of science and technology interventions on the table to help the reef to adapt and recover and resist climate change. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, great. Okay. And so with that, I'll hand over to Samantha to talk a little bit about the RRAP community panels.
So I'm hoping this works. Oh, yes, it does. Magic. Our slides is not working quite well, but the mic is. So one of these spaces for community or citizen deliberation was done in the RRAP program that brought community members and scientists together to discuss novel technology for reef restoration and adaptation. And I won't go into any detail here. I think you're getting a feel for sort of the participatory element and collaborative element of the community panels through our pictures. But just to give you a couple of aspects of those community panels, they were place-based. So we had two panels, one in Townsville and one in Cairns and Port Douglas. And they brought together a small group of community members who were selected through an expression of interest. So it was open to any community member who had an interest in engaging with us on the community panel. The discussions and the deliberations focus on a subset of reef interventions that were being explored through the RRAP program. And the deliberation was done in close collaborations with the science leads and the team members or members of the teams working on those interventions. The panel took place over an extended period of time from 8 to 10 months. So it was not just a one-off. And we took very much of a co-design approach to the setting the kind of the roadmap for those panels, what we wanted to achieve, the kind of outputs we wanted to do. So it was very much of a co-constructed journey along the way. And with that, I'll pass to Erin.
So what we would like to do today is we have invited two of the community members who participated in the first panel in Townsville and two of the RRAP intervention scientists from Ames who participated in the second panel in Cairns Port Douglas. So it's a little bit like some kind of dating game show. I think they've never met before. Well, maybe not. I think you just met each other today. So here we are. And we have 3 questions that we'd like to pose to the panelists. And I think, again, just one more point I was going to make is that we really want to surface some of those mammoths, so to speak, that we don't always acknowledge or address up front. It's really easy to say, oh, this has been a great process. It's worked really well. People enjoyed it. They got a lot of value from it. But we want to probe a little bit deeper some of the value, but also some of the challenges and things that might need more attention. So with that, first question.
Well, before going to the first question, I just wanted to thank the panel members for, joining us on this kind of reflection on the community panels. I mean, we really sort of value this moment to be able to actually reflect and learn from this engagement process. So, I mean, the first question that we have is around, it's a bit of a provocative question, a bit of a devil's advocate. So, why even have these community-based panels? We know that they take a lot of time. They took a humongous amount of commitment from panel members, and they took a lot of time to organize and facilitate. So I might turn to Keith and ask, what's the value of having these types of resource-intensive panels? Couldn't, interviews or a one-off meeting also give us a sense of what community members think about reef interventions? And after Keith, I'll ask Holland to also respond.
Okay, Sam. So when I saw your title, Mammoths, my brain automatically thought elephants in the room, the modern analogy. And to me, it was what attracted me to it is the opportunity to have a say in the future of the place I live in and how it's managed. And I've been around science. I don't really class myself a scientist, but for a long time. But I've also been in the world of natural resource management, farming, etc. I know that science is a tool and a really valuable tool, but I also know that there is a lot of knowledge and skills out there in the community that is often not tapped into. And this seemed to be a mechanism to genuinely engage community, to get their perspective on what was a pretty bold initiative, adaptation of our most valuable natural asset, and also to tap into other ideas that might be there that mightn't have occurred to the scientists involved. So for me, that was it.
I think, so in the context of what would be the other way that we would get this type of information, you would have like a survey or maybe a workshop or kind of this one-off instance. But I think that these panels allowed for a real conversation and time to think and time for the scientists to hear what people really feel about it. And we can mitigate concerns that way. And we can also adjust what we are doing that way. So that's the real value of this, having the sustained contact and a sustained conversation.
I think the sustained part you said is really important. Like, it's really easy to meet and have a great conversation. Then you go away and you think about it, and there's things you didn't think to say at the time. And so the fact that it happened over an extended period of time, like, had logistical challenges, getting everyone in the same room over months, literally, but it was worth it because we had the opportunity to write our expectations at the beginning and then revisit them at the end. And that was really powerful to see how your personal thinking had evolved, but also how it had contributed.
Okay. Yes. So our next question is about, so while these panels were designed to be a deliberative space, they're also a mechanism for providing feedback to the RRAP program and the scientists working on the interventions. So if I can first ask you, Rowan, and then Keith, about what you hoped, what kind of input you hoped that the RRAP program or the scientists would take on board.
One of the first things that happened in these sessions was the scientists would explain their various interventions. And immediately I felt like, what could I say here? Because my scientific literacy is quite poor. And it felt like a lot of these projects were going away because they can, like they were happening. It was like a question, can we do this? But as the sort of sessions went along, you could start to see the scientists reckoning with the idea with us, like we were all thinking about this, like should we do some of these things? And if we do, what should that look like? And I don't know, I just sort of hope that question of should continues to sort of like, you know, be part of the way that scientists are thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, and I've said why I was attracted to it, but from the very first meeting when we shared our expectations of the room, it was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, and I hadn't thought of that. And it was just like getting those other perspectives just straight up was really powerful. So, yeah.
And can we ask you, Yui, what did you actually take on board from the panel? Were there things that you actually could, or that you could imagine taking on board in the future, or that the broader program could?
Yeah. This one's funky. So just a bit of background. I studied the sort of issue, the potential issues about like coral aquaculture in terms of like genetics and you know, health and disease and things like this. And I recall that, you know, this is sort of the voice also coming from the panel members from the wider community. Like, you know, have you thought about potential, you know, negative impact of like growing corals in large number, maybe, you know, genetic diversity is low, or, you know, how about the disease that you may be actually, you know, introduce into the ecosystem? And that I recall that moments like, yeah, that's exactly what we thought about, and that's what we study. And that was kind of like a reassuring, empowering moment where our scientific questions actually aligns with public interest and concerns as well. So that was kind of like a, yeah, well, that's great. You know, I mean, it's more like reconfirm, like, you know, assure that this is like, we are addressing some, you know, questions, important questions that might be quite widely relevant to people as well. And maybe another thing, if I may add, was one of another member that I was with was working in the sort of like partnership build, capacity build team for the RRAP PDP that we mentioned earlier. And I think it was, you know, we always have the vision of like having this technology to be taken up by wider community to be applicable. So, you know, we're looking for partnership and capacity and perhaps like appetite to take up this. And I think one of the things that I recall was like the industrial partners, like diving industry and other community members also have like good capacity and appetite. It's like, yeah, we have a diving board. We have people who want to participate in that sort of thing. So, you know, I think that was kind of into a consideration. How do we actually then establish technology that can be transferable to a wider community? So that was kind of moment that, you know, we take up this kind of like a wider understanding of what could be achieved by technologies that we are studying.
Yeah, I was absolutely thrilled at the workshop that I was at Cannes. I think the wanting to help scientists and do citizen science was just much greater than I had anticipated. And I still keep that in mind from that workshop and certainly advocate for that where we can. I don't know that we're quite there yet with the programs that I'm involved in, but
How are we doing with time? I have 5 minutes. Thank you. So the last question I have for the panel members has to do with some of the value derived from these deliberative panels. So we've discussed about some of the more tangible outcomes from the panels, such as, you know, eliciting different perspectives about the risks and opportunities associated with the different interventions. But there are also intangible values that come from, you know, participating in these kind of deliberative panels, and that's building relationships and trust. So one of the key questions for us is, and I'll start off with you, Yui, is sort of as panel members and the scientists who work in RRAP and the RRAP program as a whole, what can we do to sustain the connections and the relationships and trust after the panels end? And how can we, you know, what can we do to share and extend those benefits to the broader community? Do you have any reflections on that?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think sustained communication and building the trust has been mentioned earlier in today as well. It does really take the people time, and and I think that's really highlights the importance of the investment in people and program like that to keep the connection. I could think of website and e-newsletters and things like that too, but that behind that is always the people that need to drive that. So I think more support in that sense is quite important. In terms of like reaching a wider audience, we've discussed a little bit about how community members has participated out of the people who are already interested in that area, right? But how do we actually know the even wider public? Maybe we go out and then talk to people, and those who might not be interested in might not even listen to us. But that's a reality that we are facing as well. Maybe that itself has importance, and we have to think about that as well, I think.
Yeah, well, I feel connected to these projects when I read about them. There's an article recently I saw in New Scientist about the cloud brightening project. And I thought, oh, I know that. But not only do I know it, I feel I have talked about the process, but also the projects within the communities in which I operate. So I suppose there's a degree of advocacy and support there. And I think, as humans, we're always more inclined to listen to somebody's opinion when you know them rather than when you don't know them. So I think it puts out in the community, sure, it's not a big group, but there's, for better, for advocacy, positive or negative, you've got people out there who know something about it and are prepared to talk. And I think that's really good. I also think that the mechanism, I would just love to see more of it happening, because the world that we live in belongs to all of us. But if we disappear, the world would continue. That's, the world will look after itself. So we collectively have a responsibility to choose the future we want to live in. And that can't be left to scientists or politicians or anyone. We need to somehow scope out how everybody gets more of a say into this shared future if we've got any hope of agreeing on what that future looks like. So I think it's a really important and big step towards that.
Yeah, I just would agree with everything, just the amount of time that was allowed to build the trust. But those sessions also allow people to tell lots of different stories, even the scientists as well. And that really brought you into a different type of world as well. So sort of gets lost, I think, with, to echo Luna's talk earlier, that role of telling stories is so much more powerful than, graphs, in my opinion. That's me.
I think I echo a lot of the sentiment, but I think, as has already been mentioned today, that the building of relationships, and it is worth the time, and it is worth the effort.
I think we're out of time, but I would like to thank our panel members. And we have 30 seconds. Does anyone want to add anything additional?
Just wanted to add, like what I just mentioned, like, how about those people who never thought about reef restoration in the public? Maybe talking to them may create new funds. And I think identifying the community group that have passion to be engaging with scientific initiatives like that is probably a very empowering entity as well to keep this kind of momentum going.
Thank you very much. Please extend a thank you to the panel members.
Thank you, everyone.